The night Alara Vance's father sold her to pay his debts, she learned that some men collect interest in flesh, not currency. Standing in a penthouse that gleamed with blood money, she met Kyle Draven, the kind of monster parents whisper about after dark. His empire was built on violence, his reputation was carved in bone, but when his storm-gray eyes found hers across that cold room, something shifted. He didn't see a transaction. He saw her, and that terrified her more than anything else. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far Alara's story travels. The rain came down like judgment that night, turning the Chicago streets into rivers of neon and regret. Alara pressed her forehead against the taxi window, watching the city blur past, familiar blocks that suddenly felt like foreign country. Her father sat beside her, silent for once, his cologne unable to mask the stink of desperation that had clung to him for months. "Fix your face," Marcus Vance muttered, not looking at her. "You look like you're going to a funeral." Maybe I am, Alara thought. Mine. She'd known something was wrong when he'd showed up at her apartment 3 hours ago. Stone sober for the first time in weeks. The Marcus Vance who'd raised her, if you could call it that, didn't do sober anymore. Not since her mother had walked out when Alara was 12, taking whatever warmth their house had ever held and leaving nothing but empty bottles and emptier promises. "Where are we going?" She'd asked the question twice already. Got silence both times. The taxi pulled up to a high-rise that stabbed into the stormy sky like a middle finger to heaven, all glass and steel and money. So much money it didn't need to announce itself. You could feel it in the air, thick and suffocating. Marcus finally looked at her. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with something that might have been guilt if she didn't know him better. "I need you to understand something, Alara. Sometimes we don't get choices. Sometimes life backs you into a corner and you do what you have to do." Her stomach dropped. "Dad, I owe people. Dangerous people." He grabbed her wrist, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "And you're going to help me pay what I owe." The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. "What are you—" But he was already pulling her from the cab, through revolving doors that whispered wealth, into a lobby where even the air smelled expensive. A man in a suit too perfect to be real appeared at Marcus's elbow, spoke in low tones, gestured toward the elevators. Alara's heels clicked against marble that probably cost more than her yearly salary at the diner. She'd been waitressing for 3 years, saving every penny she could hide from her father's grasping hands, dreaming of the day she could disappear. Should have disappeared sooner, should have seen this coming. The elevator rose so smoothly she barely felt the movement, just the numbers climbing. 30 floors, 40, 50. Away from the ground, away from escape, away from every version of her life she'd imagined. "Dad, please." Her voice cracked, hated herself for it. "Whatever this is, shut up." Not angry. Worse. Resigned, like he'd already let her go in his head. "Just try not to embarrass me." The elevator opened onto a penthouse that existed in a different dimension of wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like it was a game board. Modern art that was probably worth more than most houses. Furniture that looked uncomfortable because it was designed to impress, not to live in. And men. A half dozen of them, scattered through the space like pieces on that game board. All watching, all armed. She could tell by the way their jackets hung, the way they stood with weight distributed like they expected violence. But it was the man by the windows who made her breath catch. He stood with his back to them, hands in his pockets, watching the storm like it answered to him. Tall enough that her brain stuttered over the word tall and went straight to dangerous. Dark hair, darker suit, and an absolute stillness that suggested a predator conserving energy between kills. Draven. Marcus's voice had gone thin, reedy, the voice of a man who knew he was drowning. "I brought her, like you asked." The man at the window turned. Alara had seen dangerous men before. Chicago was full of them. Men who hit women in dive bar bathrooms, men who sold poison to kids, men who'd kill you for looking at them wrong. She knew how to make herself small, invisible, beneath notice. But Kyle Draven wasn't that kind of dangerous. He was the kind who didn't need to raise his voice because when he spoke, people listened or they stopped breathing. Mid-30s, with a face that suggested Slavic ancestry and eyes the color of a winter storm, gray with flecks of silver that caught the light like knife edges. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, another traced his jaw. Not the marks of street fights. Precise. Professional. His gaze found her, held. Something shifted in those storm-gray eyes. "This is your daughter." Not a question, a statement that somehow felt like an indictment. "Alara," Marcus confirmed, practically vibrating with nervous energy. 24, clean, never been in trouble. She's... I didn't ask for her resume. Cale's voice was quiet, controlled, and cold enough to frost the air. He moved closer, each step deliberate, studying her like she was a puzzle he was deciding whether to solve or discard. Alara forced herself to meet his eyes, refused to look away even though every survival instinct she had was screaming at her to run. You couldn't show fear to men like this. Fear was blood in the water. "She knows?" Kael asked Marcus, still watching her. "She knows what she needs to." "I'm asking if she knows what you're doing right now." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "What you brought her here for." Silence. Marcus shifted, cleared his throat. "She's smart. She'll figure it out." Kael's jaw tightened. He looked at her again, and this time his expression did something complicated, flickered through emotions too fast for her to name before settling back into that controlled neutrality. "Your father owes me $3 million. Money he borrowed to feed a gambling problem he doesn't have under control. Money I don't expect to see returned because he's already lost it, along with everything else he owns." The words landed like physical blows. 3 million. Jesus Christ. "I didn't..." Marcus started. "You did." Kael cut him off without raising his voice. "You borrowed from the Volkov organization 6 months ago. When you couldn't pay them, they sold your debt to me at a significant discount because they know what I do to people who waste my time with unpayable debts." Alara's hands had gone numb. She curled them into fists, nails biting palms, focused on that small pain because the larger one was too big to process. "The standard solution," Kael continued, conversational now, like he was discussing the weather, "involves your father's body washing up somewhere photogenic. The Chicago River, perhaps. Send a message to others who might consider defaulting." Marcus made a sound like a wounded animal. "But your father made me an offer." Those gray eyes hadn't left her face. A trade. His debt in exchange for something of value. The room tilted. Alara grabbed the back of a nearby chair, leather, butter soft, probably cost more than her car, and held on. "No." "You see why this requires clarification," Kael said to Marcus, though he was still watching her. "She doesn't appear to be aware of the arrangement you proposed." "Alara," her father's voice pleading now, "baby, listen. Don't you dare call me that." She turned on him, and something that had been caged inside her for 24 years rattled its bars. "Don't you dare pretend this is anything other than what it is." "I had no choice." "You always have a choice." Her voice shook, but she pushed through it. "You chose to gamble. You chose to borrow money you couldn't pay back. You chose to..." The words stuck in her throat. Couldn't quite say them out loud, make them real. "To offer you as collateral," Kael finished for her. "Not an uncommon practice in certain circles, though typically reserved for more traditional arrangements. Your father suggested something more permanent, a transfer of ownership, if you will." "I'm not property." The words came out fierce, feral. "You can't own a person." Something that might have been respect flickered in Kael's expression. "Legally, no, but your father seems to believe I can be persuaded to accept you in lieu of payment. He values you at $3 million, which I find either flattering or deeply insulting to you, depending on perspective." "I won't do it." She looked at her father, this stranger wearing a familiar face. "I won't go along with whatever sick arrangement you made with him." Marcus's face crumpled. "They'll kill me, Alara. You don't understand these people. I understand you sold your daughter to save your own skin." She was shaking now, full-body tremors she couldn't control. "I understand that's who you've always been. I just didn't want to see it." "Enough." Kael's voice cracked through the room like a whip. Both of them fell silent. He moved to a bar cart, poured amber liquid into a crystal tumbler, took a slow sip before continuing. Here's what's going to happen. Marcus, you're going to leave. My men will escort you downstairs and ensure you make it home safely, because I don't kill people on impulse. I schedule it in advance. Marcus went pale. But the debt is between you and me. Your daughter is not a bargaining chip. Kael set down the glass with a soft click. You have 1 week to propose an actual solution. If you can't, we'll proceed with the standard approach. Now get out of my sight before I forget my manners. 2 of the suited men materialized at Marcus's elbows. He looked at Alara one more time, mouth working soundlessly before they led him away. The elevator doors closed on his retreating back, and then there was just silence. And Alara, alone with a man who could end her father's life with a phone call. She waited for fear, found anger instead. Thank you, she heard herself say, for sending him away. Kael turned those storm-gray eyes on her, and for the first time she saw past the controlled exterior to something more complex underneath. Don't thank me. I haven't decided what to do with you yet. With me? Her laugh came out sharp, jagged. I'm not yours to do anything with. I didn't agree to this. I didn't even know about it until 20 minutes ago. No. He studied her, head tilted slightly. You didn't, which is the only reason you're still standing here instead of being escorted to a room upstairs. The implications of that landed hard. A room. Your father proposed a very specific arrangement, you, in exchange for his debt. Not as a guest. He paused, letting her connect the dots. As property. To use as I saw fit. Bile rose in her throat. She swallowed it down, refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. And you're considering it. I'm assessing whether your father is stupid enough to think I'd accept such a proposal or desperate enough to believe I might. Kael moved closer, and she forced herself not to step back. People reveal themselves in desperation. Your father revealed that he sees you as currency, disposable, something to spend when the debt comes due. I already knew that. The admission hurt less than it should have. Maybe she'd always known. Did you? Those gray eyes searched her face. Or did you spend years telling yourself he loved you, in his way? That the drinking was grief, the gambling was escape, the neglect was just him being broken by your mother leaving? She felt stripped bare, exposed. You don't know anything about me. I know your father has been borrowing against you for years. Small loans paid back with promises of more. I know you work 60-hour weeks at a diner on 53rd Street, trying to save enough to disappear. I know you haven't had a real conversation with your father in 3 years. You just exist in the same space, orbiting each other like dead stars. He stopped just within arm's reach, close enough that she could smell cedar and something darker, like gunpowder. I know because I do my research before I collect debts. And your father's been using you as leverage long before tonight. The truth of it hit her like a fist to the solar plexus. All those times Marcus had asked for money, just a little, just to get through the month, and she'd given it. All those promises to pay her back, to get his life together, to be better. All those lies she'd swallowed because the alternative was admitting she'd been abandoned twice. Once by her mother, once by the parent who'd stayed. What do you want from me? Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. Hated herself for it. Kael was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its cold edge. I want to know if you have anywhere else to go. The question surprised her. What? Family, friends, somewhere safe. He watched her face carefully. Because if I send you home tonight, your father will disappear before the week is out. And the people he owes, the ones who sold me his debt, they'll come looking for payment. They know about you. They know what he offered. And they won't be as discriminating about consent. Her stomach turned over. You're saying I'm in danger. I'm saying your father made you a target the moment he started using your name to secure loans. Kael moved to the windows, looked out at the storm. The Volkov organization doesn't have my scruples about collateral. If they decide you're worth collecting, they will collect you. And what happens after that? He trailed off, didn't need to finish. So what? You're offering to protect me? Skepticism sharpened her tone. Out of the goodness of your heart? I don't have a good heart. He said it matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. But I have rules, lines I don't cross. Using people as currency is one of them. Then why deal in debts at all? Because money is how the world turns. I just make sure it turns in my direction. He faced her again. Your father's debt is real. He will pay it one way or another, but you were never part of that equation, not in any way that matters. Then let me go. She gestured toward the elevator. I'll disappear. Leave Chicago. He can't use me as leverage if I'm gone. You'd last 3 days. No heat in the words, just cold assessment. The Volkovs have people in every city worth running to. They'd find you, and when they did, you'd wish I'd kept you here. This is insane, she paced, nervous energy demanding outlet. I have a life, a job, an apartment, a studio in Pilsen with black mold in the bathroom, and a landlord who steals your mail. Kale's expression didn't change. A job that pays $9 an hour plus tips that barely cover rent. A life built on survival, not living. Tell me I'm wrong. She couldn't. Every word was surgical precision, cutting away the lies she'd told herself about making it work, about things getting better, about having any real control over her circumstances. What are you offering? The question came out defeated. Hated the sound of it. Safety. Kyle moved to a desk, retrieved a tablet, tapped the screen, then turned it toward her. A room here? Protection. Time to figure out what comes next without looking over your shoulder for the Volkovs or waiting for your father to sell you again. In exchange for what? Nothing. He set the tablet down. I don't trade in people. Nobody offers something for nothing. Well, I'm offering you time and safety. What you do with it is your choice. His jaw tightened. But understand this, if you walk out that door tonight, I can't protect you. And your father's debt still comes due. Which means in 1 week, he'll either be dead or desperate enough to try this again with someone who won't ask questions. The trap closed around her with silk-covered jaws. Stay and be indebted to a man who killed people for a living. Leave and risk something worse. Trust a stranger or trust the street. Some choice. She looked around the penthouse, at wealth she couldn't imagine, at a life that existed in a different atmosphere than hers. Why do you care what happens to me? Kale was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice had gone soft, almost gentle. Because I know what it's like to be used as currency. To have people decide your value in dollars instead of humanity. His eyes met hers, and for just a moment, she saw past the cold exterior to something raw underneath. And I decided a long time ago that if I was going to build an empire, it wouldn't be on the backs of people who didn't choose to be part of it. Truth. She could hear it in his voice, see it in his face. This man, this killer, this criminal, was offering her something nobody else ever had. A choice. 1 week, she heard herself say. I stay 1 week while I figure out what to do. 1 week, Kyle agreed. He gestured to one of his men, a mountain of muscle with cold eyes and scars. Dmitri will show you to your room. If you need anything, tell him. If you want to leave, he'll arrange it. You're not a prisoner. Just a guest in a gilded cage. Just a person making a choice in a world that rarely offers them. He picked up his drink again. Get some rest, Ilara. Tomorrow we'll discuss how to deal with your father's debt without anyone dying. I find I do my best problem-solving on a full night's sleep. Dmitri cleared his throat. Ilara followed him to the elevator, awareness prickling at her spine that Kyle was still watching. Not with hunger or possession, but with something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. The elevator descended 2 floors and opened onto a hallway that managed to be both luxurious and somehow livable. Warm lighting, art that wasn't trying quite so hard to be impressive, furniture that looked comfortable. This floor is residential, Dmitri said, his voice heavily accented. Russian, maybe Ukrainian. 6 suites. Yours is at the end. He opened a door to reveal a space larger than her entire apartment. Hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows with blackout curtains. A bed big enough for 3 people. A bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown in and water pressure that probably violated city codes. A closet already stocked with clothes in her size. How had they known her size? And a small kitchen area with a fridge that hummed quietly. Mr. Draven says you decide your schedule, Dmitri continued. You want food? Press 9 on the phone. You want to go somewhere? Press 3. You want to leave the building? You tell me first. He pulled a phone from his pocket. Top of the line, still in the box. Your new number, already programmed with contacts. She took it numbly. Thank you. Dmitri nodded and left, closing the door softly behind him. The lock clicked. She tried the handle. It opened. Not a prisoner then, just a bird in a very expensive cage. Ilara moved to the windows, looked down at Chicago spread out below her like a glittering circuit board. Somewhere down there, her father was probably drinking himself into oblivion, already spinning the story of how his daughter had abandoned him when he needed her most. Somewhere down there, the Volkovs were calculating whether she was worth the trouble of collection. And up here, she stood in a stranger's home, wearing shoes that were cutting blisters into her heels, trying to figure out how her life had gone from predictable poverty to whatever this was. Her phone buzzed, the new one. A text from a number marked simply as KD. The clothes in the closet are yours. So is everything else in that room. Not alone. A gift. Sleep well. She stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Why are you being kind to me?" The response came quickly. Because someone should be. Ilara sat on the edge of the bed, mattress so soft it felt like floating, and finally let herself cry. Not from fear or sadness or even anger, from exhaustion. From the weight of years spent invisible, worthless, nothing more than her father's backup plan. But Kyle Draven had looked at her and seen something else. He saw her, and that terrified her more than anything else about this strange, impossible night. She didn't know what came next, didn't know if she'd made the right choice or stepped into something worse than her father's desperation. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, someone had asked what she wanted instead of telling her what she was worth. Tomorrow, she'd figure out the rest. Tomorrow, she'd start building a plan, an escape route, a way back to a life that made sense. Tonight, she'd sleep in a bed that didn't smell like mold and desperation. Tonight, she'd pretend that being seen was enough. Ilara woke to sunlight cutting through gaps in the blackout curtains like accusations. For 3 suspended seconds, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came crashing back. Her father's desperation, the penthouse, Kyle Draven's storm-gray eyes watching her like he could see through skin to bone. She sat up, muscles protesting. She'd fallen asleep in her clothes, makeup smeared across expensive pillowcases that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Her phone, the old one, not the pristine new one Kyle had given her, showed 6:47 a.m. and 14 missed calls from her father. She deleted them without listening. The bathroom mirror showed her exactly what she expected. Yesterday's mascara creating bruised dark shadows, hair a mess, eyes red from crying. She looked like she'd been in a fight, felt like it too. The shower had 7 different settings and water pressure that could strip paint. Ilara stood under it until her skin turned pink, scrubbing away her father's cologne, the taxi's stale air, the feeling of being handed over like merchandise. When she finally stepped out, wrapped in a towel soft enough to be illegal, she found her old clothes gone. Replaced by new ones, jeans that actually fit, a simple black sweater, undergarments still in packaging. Someone had been in the room while she showered. Her stomach turned over. She dressed quickly, hyper-aware of cameras she couldn't see, watchers she couldn't name. This was the price of safety, she supposed. Privacy became negotiable when someone else controlled the walls. She was lacing up sneakers, Adidas, her size. How did they know everything? When someone knocked. "Come in." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, compact and efficient-looking, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a bun and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "Miss Vance, I'm Irina. Mr. Draven asked me to check if you needed anything." "I'm fine." Automatic response, trained into her by years of making herself small and undemanding. Irina's expression suggested she'd heard that lie before. "Breakfast is ready in the kitchen upstairs. Mr. Draven is already there. He'd like to speak with you when you're ready." Not a request. Ilara followed her to the elevator, stomach knotting. Morning after conversations were always awkward, but this wasn't a one-night stand she could ghost. This was a man who'd saved her from one trap while setting another. The penthouse kitchen was nothing like the cold showroom from last night. Morning light flooded through windows, softening the hard edges. The space smelled like coffee and something baking, cinnamon, maybe. Kale sat at an island counter, tablet in one hand, coffee in the other, looking more human than he had any right to. Dark jeans, black t-shirt, barefoot. Like he was just a man having breakfast instead of someone who could order deaths between sips of espresso. He looked up when she entered. Those gray eyes did that thing again, saw through her careful composure to the fear underneath. You slept. Eventually, she stayed near the doorway, maintaining escape routes. Old habit. Coffee? He gestures to a machine that looked like it required an engineering degree to operate. I can manage. I'm aware. It was an offer, not a commentary on your competence. The ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Irina makes it better than I do anyway. Irina materialized with a mug, pressed it into Alara's hands. The coffee was perfect, strong enough to wake the dead, sweet enough to be kind. She took a grateful sip, letting the warmth spread through her chest. Sit. Kale nodded to the stool across from him. We need to talk about your father. Alara sat. The marble was cold through her jeans. Is he dead? Not yet. Kyle set down his tablet. But he's making it difficult for me to keep him that way. What did he do? Tried to borrow money from the Bratva last night. Used your name as collateral again. His jaw tightened. Word travels fast in certain circles. By midnight, 3 different organizations knew Marcus Vance had a daughter he was willing to trade. The coffee turned to ash in her mouth. I need to leave the city. You need to let me handle this. Kale's voice was firm, but not unkind. Running makes you pray. Right now, you're under my protection. That means something to the people who matter. Protection. She set down the mug before her shaking hands betrayed her. That's just another word for ownership. It's a word for walls between you and people who'd hurt you. He leaned forward, elbows on marble. I know you don't trust me. You'd be stupid if you did, but I'm offering you something real. Time to breathe while I clean up your father's mess. What you do with that time is your choice. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything, so why go to all this trouble? Kyle was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was deciding how much truth to offer. I told you last night I don't traffic in people, but there's more to it than that. He stood, moved to the windows. I grew up in a system that treats children like investments. My father sold me to the Odessa Bratva when I was 15. Called it an apprenticeship, but we both knew what it was. Payment for debts he couldn't cover any other way. The air left Alara's lungs. Jesus. They taught me everything I know about violence, about power, about what happens to people when you strip away their choices and treat them like assets. His reflection in the glass was hard, distant. I spent 10 years earning my freedom, building something that couldn't be taken from me, and I swore when I finally bought my way out that I'd never become the kind of man who treats people as currency. But you collect debts. I do. Because money is the language of the world I live in. He turned back to her. But I collect from people who borrowed knowing the terms, who made choices, even if those choices were stupid. Your father made a choice. You didn't. That's the difference. Alara processed this, trying to reconcile the cold killer from last night with this man who spoke about trauma with clinical precision. So what? You're rescuing me out of principle? I'm protecting you because letting you get hurt violates the rules I live by. Kale returned to his seat. And because I see what your father did to you, made you invisible, made you think you're worthless. And I know how that shapes a person, how it makes you accept less than you deserve because you've been trained to believe that's all you're worth. The accuracy of it stung. She wanted to argue, defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. He was right. She'd spent years making herself small enough to fit in the spaces her father's addiction left behind. I don't need saving, she said finally. No. His expression softened. You need space to save yourself. I'm just providing the real estate. A timer chimed. Irina appeared with plates, eggs, toast, pastries that smelled like heaven. Alara's stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch shift. Eat, Kale said. Then I'll show you the rest of the estate. If you're going to stay here, even temporarily, you should know the layout. The food was perfect, which somehow made everything worse. She didn't want to be here, didn't want to need the stranger's protection, didn't want to admit that sleeping in safety had felt better than anything in her recent memory. They ate in comfortable silence. Kyle worked on his tablet, occasionally typing responses to messages that made his jaw tighten. Dangerous business conducted over breakfast like it was routine. Maybe for him it was. "Your father called me this morning," Kyle said eventually, not looking up from his screen. "Wanted to negotiate new terms." Ilara's fork clattered against her plate. "What did you tell him?" "That his debt is his problem, not yours. That if he uses your name again, I'll consider it a personal insult." He glanced at her. He didn't take it well. He never does when people establish boundaries. Years of therapy she couldn't afford had taught her the language, even if she'd never managed to apply it to her own life. "He'll try to contact you, probably already has." Kale set down the tablet. "You need to decide how you want to handle that." "I don't want to talk to him." "Then don't. Block his number. I can have my people intercept if he shows up here." He paused. "But understand, if you cut contact, he'll escalate. Probably show up at your apartment, your work, make a scene." I don't have a work anymore." The realization hit her like cold water. "I was supposed to open this morning. They'll fire me for no call, no show." "Irina called them yesterday, told them you had a family emergency and needed to take leave." Kale's expression was carefully neutral. "They were understanding." "You had no right." "You're right. I didn't." He met her anger steadily. "But you were in no state to make that call yourself, and leaving them hanging seemed cruel to everyone involved. If you want to quit, quit. If you want to go back, I'll have a driver take you. Your choice." That word again, choice, like he was trying to give her what had been taken, even in small ways. Ilara pushed her plate away, appetite gone. "Show me the estate. If I'm going to be a bird in a cage, I should at least know how big the cage is." Something that might have been approval flickered in Kyle's eyes. He stood, gestured for her to follow. "It's bigger than you think." The building was a beast. 63 floors of steel and glass, with the top 5 owned entirely by Kyle. The penthouse where they'd met last night was for business, showing power to people who needed to be impressed. The floor below held offices where men in expensive suits managed money and operations Ilara probably didn't want to know about. The residential floor where she'd slept was sandwiched between them, a buffer zone between violence and commerce. "The bottom 2 floors are mine as well," Kyle explained as they took the elevator down. "Gym, pool, security operations, storage, everything I need to run things without leaving the building." "Fortress," Ilara said. "Exactly." No apology in his voice. "I have enemies, lots of them. This building is designed to keep them out and my people safe." The gym was industrial, filled with equipment that looked military grade. Punching bags hung from reinforced ceiling mounts, weights that could anchor ships. A boxing ring in the corner where 2 men were sparring, moving with the fluid precision of trained fighters. "You box?" Kyle asked. "I waitress. Different skill set." "Same principle. Stay on your feet, protect yourself, know when to dodge." He moved to a smaller area with mats and training dummies. "You're welcome to use any of this. Dimitri teaches hand-to-hand on Tuesdays and Thursdays if you're interested." "Why would I need hand-to-hand combat training?" "Because the world is dangerous, and being able to defend yourself is never a waste of time." He said it like it was obvious. Maybe in his world it was. The pool was Olympic-sized, heated, with windows overlooking the city. Ilara stared at it, trying to remember the last time she'd been swimming. Middle school, maybe. Before her mother left and money got tight and luxuries like pool memberships became impossible dreams. "It's yours if you want it," Kyle said, watching her face. "Everything in this building is available to you while you're here." "I don't have a swimsuit." "Irina can get you one. Or 10. Whatever you need." The casual wealth of it made her dizzy. He spoke about buying swimsuits like ordering coffee. Mundane, easy, meaningless. Meanwhile, she'd spent 3 years wearing the same winter coat because buying a new one meant not eating for a week. They moved to the security floor, a command center straight out of an action movie. Screens showing every angle of the building, the street outside, the parking garage. 3 people monitoring feeds, typing on keyboards, speaking into headsets in rapid Russian. "This is Yuri," Kyle gestured to a man whose shoulders suggested a past life as a linebacker. "Head of security. If you need to go somewhere, Yuri arranges it. If you see something concerning, Yuri handles it. Yuri nodded at her, expression professional. Miss Vance. Just Alara. The formality felt wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes. As you wish. Yuri's accent was thicker than Dimitri's. You need anything? You tell me. They took the elevator back up, and Alara tried to process the scale of what she'd seen. This wasn't just a home. It was an operation. A small army dedicated to keeping Kyle safe and his business running. You live like you're at war, she said, when they returned to the residential floor. I am at war, just a cold one. Kyle stopped outside her door. The Volkovs want my territory. The Italians want my shipping routes. The Triads want my laundering connections. And everyone wants me dead so they can divide the spoils. So yes, I live like I'm at war, because the moment I relax, I lose. Sounds exhausting. It is. For a moment he looked tired, genuinely tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. But it's the life I chose, the empire I built, and I protect what's mine. Am I yours now? The question came out sharper than she meant it to. Kale's expression hardened. You're under my protection. That's not the same as ownership, no matter how it feels. He stepped closer, and she fought the urge to step back. I need you to understand something, Alara. The people in my world, they see you as leverage against me now. You're visible in a way you weren't before. That's dangerous. Then let me go. Where? Back to your apartment, where the Volkovs know to find you? Back to your father, who will sell you again the first time someone offers cash? His voice was soft but relentless. You can leave any time you want. I meant that. But leaving doesn't make you safe. It just makes you alone. The truth of it settled in her chest like a weight. She was trapped, but not by locks and guards. By circumstances her father had created, and she couldn't undo. I hate this, she whispered. I know. Something almost gentle crossed his face. But hate can be useful. Channel it into something productive. Learn to fight. Study the world you're in. Figure out how to protect yourself so you don't need me to do it for you. And until then, you're safe here. The rules are simple. Don't leave the building without security. Don't talk to people about where you're staying or who you're with. Don't trust anyone who approaches you with offers that sound too good to be true. He paused. And don't go into my office on the business floor without permission. Everything else is fair game. Alara nodded, throat tight. When will you deal with my father's debt? I already am. Kale pulled out his phone, showed her a series of messages. I've given him 1 week to produce $1 million. If he does, I'll forgive the rest. If he doesn't, I take possession of everything he owns and sell it to cover what he can't pay. He doesn't have $1 million. He doesn't have anything. I know. But this gives him the illusion of control. Lets him spend the next week scrambling and failing instead of doing something stupider. Kale pocketed the phone. In the meantime, I'm reaching out to the Volkovs and the Bratva, making it clear you're off limits. Cost me some favors, but it's necessary. Why go to all this trouble? He looked at her for a long moment, those storm-gray eyes searching her face. Because I remember what it felt like to be 15 and helpless, and I swore I'd never let someone else feel that way if I could prevent it. The elevator chimed. Dimitri appeared, expression grim. Boss, we have a problem. Kael's entire demeanor shifted, from almost gentle to razor-focused in a heartbeat. What kind? Marcus Vance is downstairs, drunk, making threats. Security tried to remove him, but he's causing a scene. Alara's stomach dropped. No. Stay here, Kael ordered, already moving toward the elevator. He's my father. You should stay here where you're safe while I handle this. His voice had gone cold again. All the earlier warmth evaporated. Dimitri, keep her on this floor. Nobody in or out without my authorization. The elevator doors closed on his retreating back, leaving Alara alone with Dimitri in rising panic. She moved to the windows, could just barely see the building entrance 60 floors below. A crowd was gathering, her father's voice probably carrying through the morning air, making a spectacle of himself like he always did when drunk. He'll be okay, Dimitri said quietly. Boss won't hurt him. That's not what I'm worried about. Alara pressed her forehead to the glass. My father has a gift for making things worse. If he says the wrong thing, pushes too hard, then Boss will handle it. He's good at de-escalation. He's good at killing people. That too. Dmitri almost smiled, but he prefers not to. Says it's messy and draws too much attention. 15 minutes crawled by like hours. Alara paced, checked her phone obsessively, imagined a dozen scenarios that all ended in violence. Finally, the elevator chimed. Kale emerged, jaw tight, knuckles red. Is he alive? Removed from the premises, banned from entering the building again. Kyle moved past her to the kitchen, poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey despite the early hour, drank it in one swallow. Your father has a death wish. What did he say? Things I won't repeat because they were designed to hurt you. Kale set down the glass with enough force that she was surprised it didn't shatter. He tried to tell me you orchestrated this, that you convinced him to offer you as payment because you wanted access to my money. The accusation landed like a physical blow. That's insane. I know, told him as much. Didn't stop him from shouting it to anyone who'd listen. Kale's hands were shaking, small tremors he couldn't quite control. Rage, barely leashed. I almost broke his jaw, came very close. Why didn't you? Because you'd have blamed yourself, and he's not worth your guilt. He poured another drink, didn't touch it, just stared at the amber liquid like it held answers. Your father is a coward and a liar. He'll say anything to avoid responsibility for what he's done. You need to accept that he's not going to suddenly become the parent you deserved. I know that. She'd known it for years. Didn't make it hurt less. Do you? Kale turned to face her. Because from where I'm standing, you're still making excuses for him, still hoping he'll choose you over his addiction, and that hope is going to destroy you if you let it. You don't know anything about my relationship with my father. I know enough. I know he threw you to wolves to save his own skin. I know he's downstairs right now, drunk before noon, blaming you for his failures. I know he stopped, visibly forcing himself to calm. I know what it's like to want your parent to love you more than they love their demons. And I know that sometimes they just can't. Silence stretched between them, heavy with truths neither wanted to acknowledge. I need air, Alara said finally. Roof. I'll have Dmitri take you up. The rooftop was a garden, actual grass, trees and planters, flower beds that defied the Chicago wind, a space carved out of steel and concrete that somehow felt alive. Alara stood at the edge, looking down at the city that had never felt like home, and let herself cry properly for the first time since this nightmare started. She cried for the father she'd wanted and never had, for the girl she'd been before she learned that love was always conditional, for the woman she'd become, so skilled at making herself small that she'd nearly disappeared entirely. He's not worth your tears. Alara turned to find Kyle standing a respectful distance away, hands in his pockets, expression carefully neutral. I'm not crying for him. I'm crying for me, for the years I wasted believing he'd change. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater, his sweater, technically, since everything she owned now had been provided by him. You were right. I kept making excuses. Kept thinking if I was just patient enough, good enough, quiet enough, he'd finally see me. And now? Now I know better. She turned back to the view. He sold me. Actually looked a stranger in the eye and offered me like I was furniture. There's no coming back from that. Kale moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not touching. What will you do? I don't know. The honesty felt like freedom. I've spent so long just surviving that I don't know how to do anything else. Then learn. He gestured to the city below. You're smart, resourceful. You've kept yourself alive in circumstances that would have broken most people. Imagine what you could do if you actually had resources. Resources you're providing. For now, but that doesn't have to be permanent. He glanced at her. I meant what I said about choices. You can stay as long as you need, and when you're ready to leave, when you have a real plan and real safety, I'll help you do it. No strings. Why? Because everyone deserves a chance to become who they're supposed to be instead of who circumstances force them to be. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. And because I see potential in you that you don't see in yourself yet. Alara looked at him, really looked, past the violence and the power and the cold exterior to whatever lay beneath. Found someone who'd been broken and rebuilt himself into something functional, if not whole. Someone who understood what it meant to be used and had chosen to be different. "I don't trust you," she said. "Good. You shouldn't." A faint smile touched his mouth. "But maybe you can trust that I mean what I say. That I won't hurt you, won't use you, won't treat you like you're less than human. Everything else we'll figure out as we go." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, turning the sky the color of bruises. Alara watched them roll in and felt something shift in her chest. Not hope, exactly. Something more solid. Determination, maybe. She'd spent 24 years being invisible, being worthless, being nothing more than collateral for someone else's mistakes. Time to be something different. "Teach me," she said. Kale raised an eyebrow. "Teach you what?" "Everything. How your world works, how to protect myself, how to see the threats before they arrive." She met his eyes. "You said I could use the gym, the training. I want to learn, want to stop being helpless. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing is." She felt steadier now, grounded. "I've been running my whole life, time to learn how to fight." Something that looked like respect crossed Kael's face. "All right, we start tomorrow. 6 a.m. Dimitri will teach you basics, but understand, this isn't a game. Once you learn how to hurt people, you can't unlearn it. It changes you." "I'm already changed. Might as well be useful." She turned back to the view, watched lightning fork through distant clouds. "Besides, if I'm going to survive in your world, even temporarily, I need to know how to move in it. My world." Kael's expression was unreadable. "You think you can handle it?" "I handled my father for 24 years. I can handle anything." The rain started then, soft at first, then building to a downpour that drove them back inside. They stood in the elevator, dripping on expensive floors, not speaking. The silence felt different than before, less hostile. More like two people circling the possibility of understanding each other. When they reached the residential floor, Kael paused before letting her exit. "Alara, about your father. If he contacts you again, don't engage. Let me know immediately. He's desperate, and desperate men do stupid things." "I know." She stepped out, turned back. "Thank you. For earlier. For not letting him—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I told you. I protect what's mine." At her sharp look, he corrected himself. "What's under my protection? Force of habit." She almost smiled. "Good night, Kael." "It's 2 p.m. "Then good afternoon." She headed to her room, feeling his eyes on her back until the door closed between them. Inside, she found new clothes laid out on the bed. Athletic gear for tomorrow's training. A tablet with a note. For studying. Password is your birth year. KD. She picked up the tablet, found it loaded with files. Documents about the criminal organizations operating in Chicago. Profiles of major players. Maps of territory divisions. Information that could get someone killed if it fell into the wrong hands. He was giving her access to his world, trusting her with secrets, or testing her. She wasn't sure which. Alara spent the rest of the day reading, absorbing, understanding the scope of what she'd stumbled into. Kael wasn't just a criminal. He was an architect of a shadow empire, carefully balanced between violence and commerce, held together by fear and respect in equal measure. And somehow, she'd become part of it. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing that had happened to her in years. No pretending, no hiding, just the brutal truth of power and survival laid bare. She fell asleep with the tablet on her chest, storm raging outside, and dreamed of becoming someone strong enough that no one could ever sell her again. Dimitri woke her at 5:30 with coffee and the kind of expression that suggested backing out wasn't an option. Alara dragged herself from bed, muscles already protesting the workout they hadn't started yet, and changed into the athletic gear that fit like it had been tailored specifically for her body. Probably had been. The gym was empty at this hour except for Dimitri and one other man running on a treadmill with the grim determination of someone outrunning demons. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the air smelled like sweat and rubber, and Alara's brain was still half asleep. "We start with stretching," Dimitri said, dropping a mat at her feet. You pull something first day, boss will have my head. Kael isn't here? Boss has conference call with Tokyo. Business doesn't sleep. Dmitri folded himself into a stretch that should have been anatomically impossible for someone his size. You want to learn? You learn from me. I teach hand to half his men. You'll be fine. Fine was relative. By the time they'd finished warming up, Ilara's muscles were screaming. Dmitri moved her through basic stances, correcting her form with gentle precision, explaining the mechanics of balance and leverage like he was teaching physics instead of violence. Fighting isn't about strength, he said, demonstrating a move that sent her stumbling backward even though he'd barely touched her. It's about understanding how body works, where weak points are, how to use attackers' momentum against them. Easy for you to say. You're built like a tank. I'm built like tank because I train. You train, you get stronger. He reset her stance, hands impersonal on her shoulders. But strength isn't everything. You're small, fast. Learn to move, to dodge, to strike where it hurts most. Big men fall hard when you know where to hit. They worked for 90 minutes. Dmitri was patient but relentless, making her repeat movements until her body remembered them even when her brain was mush. Jabs, crosses, elbow strikes, knee drives. How to break a grip, how to create distance, how to run if running was the smart choice. Running isn't cowardice, Dmitri said when she protested learning escape techniques. Running is intelligence. You only fight when you have no choice. Otherwise, you survive. By 7 a.m., Ilara was drenched in sweat and shaking from exertion. Dmitri handed her a towel and a protein shake that tasted like chalk but apparently was necessary. You did good, he said. Tomorrow we do it again, every day until your body knows these moves without thinking. How long did it take you to learn? Years, but you don't need years to learn enough to protect yourself. 3 months, maybe 6, you'll be dangerous enough that most people think twice. He almost smiled. Boss wants you safe. I make sure you safe. Is good motivation. Ilara showered in the gym facilities, letting hot water work on muscles that would be screaming by tomorrow. When she emerged, she found Kael waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his phone, looking like he'd been awake for hours. Probably had been. Dmitri says you're a quick study, he said without preamble. Dmitri is being polite. I'm clumsy and slow. Everyone is clumsy and slow at first. You showed up. That's what matters. He pocketed his phone. Breakfast? They rode the elevator in silence. Kael had the particular stillness of someone operating on too little sleep and too much caffeine, jaw tight with the kind of tension that suggested the Tokyo call hadn't gone well. Ilara had learned to read these moods over the past 3 days, the subtle shifts in his demeanor that telegraphed danger or distraction, or the razor-edge focus that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Irina had breakfast waiting. Ilara ate mechanically, refueling rather than enjoying, while Kyle scrolled through his tablet with the kind of concentration that excluded everything else. Problem? She asked eventually. He glanced up, surprised, like he'd forgotten she was there. The Yakuza are pushing into my shipping routes. Want to renegotiate terms that were settled 5 years ago. Can they do that? They can try. Doesn't mean I'll let them. He set down the tablet with enough force to rattle his coffee cup. Sorry, this doesn't concern you. Everything that affects you affects me now. That's how this works, isn't it? She took a sip of orange juice, watching him over the rim. You protect me, but I'm tied to your reputation. Your enemies become my enemies. Sharp. Something that might have been approval crossed his face. You've been reading the files I gave you. What else am I supposed to do? I can't work, can't leave, can't live my normal life. Might as well understand the world I'm trapped in. You're not trapped. Semantics. She set down her glass. What happens with the Yakuza? Kyle studied her for a moment, like he was deciding how much truth to offer. I fly to Los Angeles next week. Meet with their leadership. Remind them why the current terms exist and what happens if they push too hard. Sounds dangerous. It is, but less dangerous than ignoring them. He leaned back in his chair. This life, what I do, it's constant negotiation between violence and diplomacy. Knowing when to use which is how you stay alive. Will you take me with you? The question surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. His eyebrows rose. To Los Angeles? You said I should understand your world. Hard to do that from a gilded cage in Chicago. She met his eyes steadily. Besides, if I'm going to be a target, I should see how you handle threats. Learn from watching. It's not a spectator sport. I'm not asking to watch. I'm asking to learn. She felt something shift in her chest, that same determination from yesterday solidifying into purpose. You want me to be able to protect myself? Then let me see how you move through danger, how you read people, how you decide who to trust. Kale was quiet for a long moment, gray eyes searching her face for something she wasn't sure she was showing. You understand what you're asking? Once you step deeper into this world, it's harder to step back out. I'm already in it. My father made sure of that. She pushed away her plate, appetite gone. At least if I'm learning, I'm doing something useful instead of just hiding. You're not hiding, you're recovering. From what? My father's been using me as collateral for years, you said so yourself. I've been a victim so long I don't remember what anything else feels like. The words came out harder than she meant them to. I don't want to be a victim anymore. Something shifted in Kael's expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. All right, you can come to Los Angeles, but you follow orders without question, stay where I put you, and if I say run, you run. Understood? Understood. And you keep training with Dimitri every day between now and then. If you're coming into my world, you need to be ready for it. Alara nodded, feeling the weight of the commitment settle across her shoulders. She was choosing this, not being forced, not being sold, but actively stepping toward danger because hiding felt worse than fighting. The week that followed developed its own rhythm. Wake at 5:30, train with Dimitri until her muscles burned, shower, breakfast with Kael while he worked through whatever crisis the night had delivered. Then hours in her room studying the files, learning the architecture of the criminal ecosystem, understanding territories and alliances, and the delicate balance that kept the whole system from exploding into open war. Kael spent most days in his office, managing operations she only glimpsed through overheard conversations and terse phone calls in languages she didn't speak. But the evenings became something different. He'd appear at her door around 7, ask if she wanted dinner, and they'd eat together in the kitchen while he explained the nuances of what she'd been reading. The Italians control most of the south side, he told her over pasta that Irina had made from scratch. The Triads have Chinatown and parts of the north. The Bratva runs protection rackets in the industrial districts. Everyone has their territory, their specialty. The trick is maintaining balance. And you? I'm the one who moves between all of them. Neutral ground. I broker deals, launder money, provide services none of them can get elsewhere. As long as I'm useful to everyone and loyal to no one, I stay alive. Sounds lonely. Kael's fork paused halfway to his mouth. It is, but lonely beats dead. She learned about his operation piece by piece, how he'd built an empire on being indispensable. The man who could move cargo that couldn't be moved legally, clean money that needed cleaning, broker peace when war was bad for business. How he'd survived in a world that chewed up and spit out most players within 5 years by being smarter, more disciplined, and more ruthless when ruthlessness was required. You ever kill anyone who didn't deserve it? She asked one night, wine loosening her tongue. Kael set down his glass. Define deserve. You know what I mean. Someone innocent. No one in my world is innocent, that's the point. His expression was hard, distant. But I've killed people who were just doing their jobs, following orders, protecting their own. Does that count? I don't know. Me neither. He stood, carried his plate to the sink. That's the thing about this life. The lines get blurry fast. You tell yourself you only hurt people who hurt you first, but eventually that's everyone. So you make rules. You draw boundaries. You decide what you will and won't do, and you stick to it even when it costs you. What are your boundaries? He looked at her over his shoulder, something complicated in his expression. No kids. Ever. No trafficking. Drugs are business. People aren't. No unnecessary violence. If I can resolve something with words, I do. And no one under my protection gets hurt. Those are my lines. Cross them. I become the monster everyone thinks I am. You're not a monster. You don't know that yet. But he said it softly, almost gently. Give it time. The morning they left for Los Angeles, Alara woke to find a garment bag hanging on her door. Inside, clothes that walked the line between professional and forgettable, The kind of outfits that wouldn't draw attention in upscale settings. A note pinned to the bag, blend in, stand out, gets people killed. KD. The private jet was smaller than she'd expected, configured for business rather than luxury. Leather seats, a conference table, enough technology to run a small country. Kale worked through takeoff, barely noticing the acceleration that pinned Alara to her seat. "You fly a lot?" she asked when they leveled off. "Twice a month, usually. Business doesn't stop for geography." He didn't look up from his laptop. "Get some rest. Meeting tonight won't be easy." "I thought I was just observing." "You are. But observing dangerous men negotiate territory can be exhausting." Finally, he looked at her. "Stay close to me. Don't speak unless spoken to directly. If shooting starts, Dmitri will get you out. Clear?" "If shooting starts?" Her stomach dropped. Unlikely, but possible. His expression was carefully neutral. "The Yakuza are honorable, generally speaking, but honor has limits when profit is involved." They landed at a private airfield in Burbank. 3 black SUVs waited on the tarmac, engines running. Kael's men materialized from the shadows, 6 of them, all armed, all moving with the coordinated precision of a military unit. "Stay between Dmitri and me," Kael said as they descended the stairs. "Don't wander. Don't make eye contact with anyone I don't introduce you to." The drive took 40 minutes, winding through LA traffic into the hills. They stopped at a restaurant that was closed for a private event, meaning Kael had rented the entire place for this meeting. Inside, the lighting was dim, the decor expensive in that understated way that screamed old money. A man waited at the center table, 60s, silver hair pulled back in a short ponytail, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Alara had made in the last year. His face was weathered, scarred, and his eyes held the kind of calm that came from seeing everything twice. Draven. His English was lightly accented, punctual as always. "Tanaka-san." Kael bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that looked natural on him. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "You say that like I had choice." But Tanaka smiled, taking the edge off the words. "Sit. We eat, we talk. We resolve this like civilized men." Kael gestured for Alara to sit beside him. She did, hyper-aware of the weight of Tanaka's attention when his eyes landed on her. "You bring guests to business meeting?" Tanaka's tone was curious, not hostile. "I bring someone learning the business," Kael said smoothly. "Alara, this is Tanaka Hiroshi. He oversees West Coast operations for the Yamaguchi Gumi." "Tanaka-san, this is Alara Vance." "Vance?" Tanaka's eyes narrowed slightly. "I know this name. Your father owes money to several organizations." Alara's blood ran cold. Kael's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once in warning or reassurance. "Her father's debts are his own," Kael said, voice level. "Miss Vance is under my protection." "Ah." Understanding flickered across Tanaka's face. "I see. You collect interesting debts, Draven." "I collect what's mine." The possessiveness in Kael's tone was deliberate, Alara realized, staking claim in a language these men understood. Tanaka nodded slowly. "Very well. We speak of shipping routes, then. You understand our position?" What followed was 2 hours of the most civilized violence Alara had ever witnessed. No raised voices, no threats, just 2 extremely dangerous men negotiating territory and profit with the precision of surgeons. Kael gave ground on minor points, held firm on major ones, and slowly, incrementally, brought Tanaka around to terms that left both sides functional, if not happy. "You drive hard bargain," Tanaka said finally, signing the agreement Kael's lawyer had produced. "Your father would be proud." Something dark crossed Kael's expression. "My father is dead. And he was proud of nothing I did." "Then he was fool." Tanaka stood, bowed. "You have honor, Draven. In this business, that is rare. I respect it." They shook hands, and Alara watched Kael's shoulders drop just slightly, tension releasing now that the immediate danger had passed. On the drive back to the airfield, Kael was quiet. Alara watched streetlights strobe across his face, highlighting the exhaustion he'd been hiding. "You did well," Dmitri said from the front seat. Both of you. I didn't do anything, Ilara said. You stayed quiet. You watched. You didn't panic when Tanaka mentioned your father. Kale glanced at her. That's more than most people manage their first time in that kind of room. He knew about my father. Everyone knows about your father. He owes half the organizations on the West Coast. Kael's jaw tightened. But you're not responsible for his debts or his reputation. I made that clear. By claiming me. By protecting you. There's a difference. He looked out the window. In their world, protection has to look like possession or it doesn't count. I hate it, but I use it because it works. They boarded the jet in silence. Once airborne, Kael poured himself whiskey, offered her one. She accepted, grateful for something to do with her hands. Your father would be proud, she said quietly. Tanaka said that. You looked like he'd punched you. Kael's expression went carefully neutral. My father was a drunk and an abuser who sold me to save his own skin. Not that different from yours, actually. So, no, he wouldn't be proud. He'd be angry I survived what he tried to make kill me. Do you miss him? I miss the father I thought I had before I learned what he really was. The one who existed before the drinking, before the gambling, before he decided I was worth less than his debts. He swirled the whiskey, watching amber liquid catch light. But that father was a fantasy, a story I told myself to make the reality hurt less. I know that story. Ilara stared into her own glass. Spent years telling it to myself about my dad. Thought if I was just good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, he'd love me the way I needed him to. And now? Now I know love doesn't work like that. You can't earn it through suffering. Either someone chooses to love you or they don't. She took a sip, liquid burning down her throat. My father chose his addiction over me every single time. I just didn't want to see it. Kael set down his glass, turned to face her fully. You're stronger than you think you are. You know that, right? I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about feeling invincible. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. His eyes searched hers. You walked into that meeting knowing it was dangerous. Sat there while men who could kill you with a phone call discussed your father's debts. Didn't flinch, didn't run. That's strength. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. He almost smiled. Get some sleep. We land in 3 hours. Ilara tried. Closed her eyes, let the engine's hum lull her, but sleep wouldn't come. She kept replaying the meeting, Tanaka's eyes when he recognized her name, Kael's hand squeezing hers under the table, the casual way they'd discussed violence like it was just business. This was her life now. Not temporarily. Not until she figured things out. This was the world she'd stepped into by accepting Kael's protection. And the strangest part was, she didn't want to leave. They landed in Chicago just after midnight. The SUV ride back to the building was quiet, both of them too tired for conversation. Dmitri went straight to the security floor. Kael walked Ilara to her door, hesitated before saying goodnight. Thank you, she said, for letting me come, for showing me how this works. Thank you for not making me regret it. His expression was soft, unguarded in a way she rarely saw. You did well today. Better than well. I just sat there. You understood the stakes, read the room, knew when to be invisible. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so casual and intimate it made her breath catch. That's a skill most people never learn. His hand lingered against her cheek. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, wondered if she wanted him to. This man who'd saved her and claimed her and was teaching her to be dangerous. But Kael stepped back, hand dropping. Get some rest. Training at 6. Always with the training. Always. But he smiled when he said it. Good night, Ilara. Good night. She closed the door and leaned against it, listening to his footsteps retreat down the hall. Something had shifted between them. In LA, maybe, or on the plane ride home, or just now in the hallway with his hand on her face. She was starting to care about him. Not just gratitude or dependency or Stockholm syndrome, but actual caring, wanting him to smile, to sleep well, to have fewer burdens crushing his shoulders. It was dangerous, stupid, exactly the kind of attachment that would complicate everything. But standing in her room, his room, technically, in his building, Under his protection, Elara admitted something she'd been avoiding for days. She didn't want this to be temporary anymore. The next morning, training was brutal. Dmitri worked her twice as hard, making her pay for the days she'd missed. By the time they finished, Elara could barely lift her arms. "You're getting stronger," Dmitri observed. "Faster. Another month, you'll be dangerous." "I don't feel dangerous. I feel like I got hit by a truck." "Trucks don't dodge, you do." He handed her a towel. "Boss wants to see you when you're cleaned up." His office. Alara's stomach flipped. She'd never been to Kael's office on the business floor. He'd specifically told her not to go there without permission. She showered quickly, changed into jeans and a sweater, and rode the elevator up. The floor was different from the residential ones, colder, more utilitarian. Men in suits moved through hallways with purpose. No one smiled. Kael's office was at the end of the corridor, behind a door with 2 guards. They nodded at her, stepped aside. She knocked. "Come in." His office was massive. Windows overlooking the city, a desk that could double as a landing pad, furniture that managed to be both expensive and functional. Maps on one wall showing territories color-coded by organization. Screens displaying feeds she didn't understand. Kael sat at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing for her to sit. She perched on the edge of a leather chair and tried not to look nervous. "No," Kael said into the phone, voice flat. "Tell Dimitrov if he wants to renegotiate, he comes here. I don't fly to Moscow for his convenience." Pause. "Then he doesn't renegotiate. Simple." He hung up without saying goodbye. "Problem?" Elara asked. "Always." He stood, moved to a cabinet, poured coffee from a pot that looked industrial, handed her a cup. "Your father contacted the Volkovs again, tried to sell them information about my operations in exchange for clearing his debt." The coffee turned to acid in her stomach. "What information?" "Nothing useful. He doesn't know anything worth selling." Kael leaned against his desk. "But the attempt is a problem. It shows he's still trying to leverage you, still using your name." "What are you going to do?" "Already done. Had my lawyers file a restraining order. Marcus Vance can't contact you, can't come within 500 feet of you, can't use your name in any business dealings. If he violates it, he goes to jail." "He'll violate it." "Probably. But it creates a paper trail, establishes pattern of harassment, makes it easier to deal with him permanently if necessary." Kael's expression was grim. "I'm trying to handle this without killing him, Elara, but he's making it difficult." "I don't want him dead." The word surprised her. "I just want him gone, out of my life, unable to hurt me anymore." "Then that's what we'll arrange." He set down his coffee. "I've been thinking about your situation, about what comes next." Her heart rate spiked. "What do you mean?" "You can't hide here forever. Eventually, you need to build a real life. Something beyond training and reading my files and waiting for your father to self-destruct." He moved closer, crouched in front of her chair so they were eye level. "What do you want, Elara? If you could do anything, be anything, what would it be?" She'd never been asked that question, not once in 24 years. "I don't know." "Think about it, because I can provide resources, education, connections, startup capital for business, whatever you need, but I need to know what you're working toward." "Why?" The question came out small. "Why invest so much in me?" Kael's eyes searched hers, and something vulnerable flickered in their depths. "Because you deserve more than survival, and because—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "Because I can, and it costs me nothing to give you a chance at something better." "That's not the real reason." "No." He stood, put distance between them. "The real reason is I see myself in you. The person I was before I learned to fight back. And I want to give you what no one gave me, a choice about who you become." The honesty of it stole her breath. She set down her coffee, stood. "What if I choose this?" "This?" "Your world. This life. What if I don't want to go back to being a waitress or get some normal job? What if I want to learn what you do?" Kael's expression went very still. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then explain it to me." She took a step closer. "You said I'm smart, resourceful, that I have potential, so use it, train me, not just to protect myself, but to actually be useful in your organization." Elara, I'm already a target because of my father, already visible because you're protecting me. Might as well make that visibility work for both of us. The words came faster now, conviction building. You need people you can trust, right? People who won't betray you for profit? I have people. You have employees. That's different. She held his gaze. I'm asking you to teach me. Let me earn my place here instead of just occupying space in your building. Kael was quiet for a long time, storm gray eyes calculating. If I say yes, and that's if, you follow every order. No questions, no hesitation. This world doesn't forgive mistakes. I understand. You think you do, but understanding and living it are different things. He moved to the window, looked out at his city. I'll consider it. But first, you finish your training with Dmitri. Prove you can handle the physical demands. Then we'll discuss the rest. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Alara left his office feeling lighter than she had in weeks. She had a purpose now, a direction. Something to work toward that was hers, not dictated by circumstances or her father's failures. She was choosing this life, this man, this dangerous, impossible world. And for the first time since her father had dragged her into that penthouse, she felt something close to hope. 3 weeks of brutal training later, Alara could drop a man twice her size if she caught him off guard. Dmitri had proven relentless, pushing her past exhaustion into the kind of muscle memory that didn't require thought. Her body had changed, lean muscle replacing softness, bruises fading into calluses, fear transforming into something harder and more useful. She was in the gym working a speed bag when the alarms started. Not fire alarms, something worse. A low, pulsing tone that made every man in the room reach for weapons that appeared from nowhere. Dmitri's hand clamped on her shoulder, already pulling her toward the elevator. What's happening? Lockdown protocol. Move. His voice was clipped, professional, terrifying in its calm. The elevator rocketed upward. Alara's ears popped from the speed. When the doors opened on the residential floor, Kael was there with 4 armed men, phone pressed to his ear, face carved from stone. Get her to the safe room, he ordered Dmitri without looking at Alara. Nobody in or out until I give the all clear. What's going on? Alara demanded. But Dmitri was already propelling her down the hall to a door she'd never noticed before. Biometric scanner, reinforced steel, the kind of security that said this room was built for sieges. Dmitri, inside now. He pushed her through, and the door sealed behind her with the finality of a tomb closing. The safe room was bigger than she'd expected, monitors showing feeds from every camera in the building, weapons locker, food and water for weeks, a bed, bathroom, everything needed to survive if the world outside went to hell. She was reaching for the door controls when the monitors flickered to life, and she saw what had triggered the alarms. The lobby was full of armed men, not Kael's people. She'd learned to recognize his crew by now. These were strangers in tactical gear, moving with military precision, weapons raised. They'd come in fast and hard, overwhelming the minimal security on the ground floor before anyone could react. Alara's hands went numb. She watched the screens, trying to count bodies. At least 20 hostiles, maybe more. They were spreading through the building, securing floors, moving with the kind of coordination that suggested this wasn't improvised. This was a planned assault. On another monitor, she saw Kael in the security control room, surrounded by his men, directing responses with sharp hand gestures. His face was calm, focused, the expression of someone who'd prepared for exactly this scenario. But 20 against his dozen was bad odds, even for him. The intercom crackled. Kael's voice filled the safe room, steady and controlled. Alara, if you can hear me, stay in there. Don't open this door for anyone except me or Dmitri. Understood? She found the response button, pressed it. What's happening? Who are they? A pause, then, the Volkovs. They're making a move for you. Her stomach turned to ice. For me. Your father sold them information about the building layout, told them where you'd be. His voice was cold, clinical. They think if they take you, they can leverage me into giving up territory. They're wrong, but they're committed now. How many? 24 that we've counted. Well-armed, well-trained. A burst of static. We're containing them to the lower floors, but it's going to get loud. Stay put, stay quiet, and whatever you hear, don't open that door. The feed cut out. Alara stared at the monitors, watching Kael's men take positions throughout the building. They moved like choreographed dancers, each knowing their role, their zone, their field of fire. Gunfire erupted on the 10th floor. The sound didn't reach her through the reinforced walls, but she saw muzzle flashes on the screens, saw one of Kael's men go down clutching his shoulder, saw another drag him to cover while returning fire with brutal efficiency. This was real. Not theoretical danger or abstract threat, but actual combat happening floors below her while she watched helplessly from a box designed to keep her safe and useless. She hated it. Hated being locked away while people fought and bled on her behalf. Hated that her father had caused this by selling information to men who'd use it to hurt Kael. Hated feeling powerless after weeks of training that was supposed to make her dangerous. The battle lasted 47 minutes. Alara watched every second, tracking movements, counting casualties. 3 of Kael's men went down. Not dead, she told herself, just wounded. 8 of the Volkovs fell and didn't get back up. The rest retreated floor by floor, realizing too late they'd walked into a fortress designed to repel exactly this kind of assault. By the time it was over, the lobby looked like a war zone. Blood on marble that probably cost a fortune. Bodies being zip-tied by Kael's people who'd survived. Emergency services wouldn't be called. This was the kind of problem you cleaned up yourself, or you invited scrutiny no one could afford. The intercom crackled again. "Alara, it's over. I'm coming to get you." 5 minutes later, the door unsealed. Kael stood on the other side, blood splattered across his shirt. Not his, she hoped. Hair disheveled, eyes harder than she'd ever seen them. "Are you hurt?" His hands were on her face before she could answer, tilting her head, checking for injuries she didn't have. "I'm fine. I was locked in a box." She grabbed his wrists. "Are you hurt?" "Couple of grazes, nothing serious." He stepped back, and she saw the tear in his sleeve where a bullet had come too close. "Your father gave them blueprints, told them the safe room location, the security protocols, everything he'd learned while living here. He was never here. He had access to your tablet, must have looked through files when you weren't paying attention." Kael's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. "They knew exactly where to hit, when to hit, how many men we'd have on each floor." Alara felt sick. "How did you stop them?" "Because I'm paranoid, and I change protocols weekly. The information he sold them was 3 weeks old. Enough to get them in the door, not enough to actually win." He turned toward the monitors, and she saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. "But it was close." "Too close. The men who were shot will live. We have a doctor who doesn't ask questions." He looked at her and something raw showed through the control. "This is why I tried to keep you separate from my operations. This is what happens when people know you matter to me." The weight of those words hung between them. "You matter to me. Not you're useful, not you're under my protection, but you matter." "I need to call my father," Alara said quietly. "No." Kael's voice was flat. "You don't. He tried to get me killed. I need to hear him say it, need to hear him admit what he did." She was shaking now, adrenaline crashing into fury. "I need him to know I know." Kael studied her face for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, dialed, put it on speaker. It rang 4 times before Marcus answered, voice slurred with drink. "Yeah?" "It's me," Alara said. "Your daughter. The one you just tried to have kidnapped." Silence. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Volkovs, the building assault, the blueprints you sold them." Her voice was steady, cold. "Did you really think Kael wouldn't figure out where they got their information? They said they just wanted to talk to you, said they'd pay my debt if I helped them." "They lied." She cut him off. "They came with 24 armed men. They shot people. They were going to take me and use me as leverage, and you knew that. You knew, and you did it anyway. I had no choice. They were going to kill me, so you decided to let them kill me instead." The words came out flat, factual. "Your daughter. The person you're supposed to protect. You sold me to save yourself." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" She was shouting now, control cracking. "Tell me, Dad. Tell me how selling your daughter to violent men was anything other than exactly what it was." Marcus made a sound like a wounded animal. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the people I owe. They're going to kill me, Alara. I'm dead either way. Then die. The words came out cold, final. But you don't get to take me with you. You don't get to use my name, my location, or anything about me ever again. I'm done. Baby, please. She ended the call, threw Kael's phone hard enough that it clattered across the floor. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clench them into fists to make it stop. He'll do it again, she said quietly. He'll keep trying to use me until someone succeeds or he gets himself killed. I know. Kael retrieved his phone, remarkably intact despite the throw. Which is why I'm ending this tonight. Ending what? Your father's debt. His access to you. All of it. His expression was grim. I tried to do this the clean way. Gave him chances to walk away. But he's too desperate and too stupid to take them. So we do it the other way. The other way? Alar's heart hammered. You mean kill him? I mean remove him as a factor in your life, permanently. Kael moved closer. But I need to know you're okay with that. Because once it's done, it's done. No taking it back. Alara thought about her father, the man who'd raised her after her mother left, who taught her to ride a bike and helped with homework when he was sober enough to focus. The same man who'd gambled away everything, who'd used her as collateral, who'd just tried to have her kidnapped to save his own skin. Two versions of the same person. The father she'd wanted and the father she'd got. I don't want him dead, she said finally, but I want him gone. I want him so scared of what you'll do to him that he never speaks my name again. Kael nodded slowly. That I can arrange. How? By making an example that everyone in this city will hear about. His eyes were cold, calculating. By showing the Volkovs what happens when they come at what's mine. And by making your father understand that the only reason he's still breathing is because you're merciful, not because he deserves it. The next 12 hours were a masterclass in controlled violence. Kyle's people moved through the city like ghosts, collecting the Volkovs who'd survived the assault, plus the ones who'd planned it from safety. By dawn, 15 men were in the building's sub-basement, a level Alara hadn't known existed, zip-tied and terrified. Kael brought her down to see. Not to participate, he said, but to understand, to see what her father's information had cost. The basement was concrete and cold, lit by harsh fluorescence that made everything look like a crime scene, which, technically, it was. The Volkovs were lined up against one wall, some bleeding from the earlier fight, all watching Kael with the expressions of men who knew they were dead and were just negotiating the method. These men came to my home, Kael said, voice echoing off concrete. He was speaking to them, but his eyes kept finding Alara, making sure she was okay. They shot my people, damaged my property, tried to take something that belongs to me. One of the Volkovs spat blood. She doesn't belong to anyone. She belongs to herself, Kael agreed, which is why taking her is theft, and I don't forgive theft. He moved down the line, studying faces. When he reached the man who'd spoken, he crouched to eye level. Who gave you the building plans? Go to hell, Kael sighed, pulled a gun from somewhere, pressed it to the man's kneecap. I'll ask once more. Who gave you the plans? Marcus Vance. The words came fast, terrified. He sold them to us, said you'd taken his daughter, that she wanted to leave but couldn't, said we'd be heroes rescuing her. And you believed him. Kael's voice was soft, almost gentle. You believed a desperate junkie over your own intelligence. He showed us messages, texts from her saying she was trapped, scared, forged. Kael glanced at Alara. Your father's been busy. She felt numb, beyond anger into a cold place where nothing touched her anymore. Her father had fabricated evidence to make it look like she was being held against her will, had probably been planning this since the day she'd agreed to stay. What happens to them? She asked. Kael stood, gun still in hand. That depends on what the Volkov organization wants more, their men or their pride. As if on cue, the door opened. A woman entered, 50s, blonde hair pulled severely back, wearing a coat that cost more than a car. She moved like violence, like she could kill everyone in the room and not break a sweat. Draven. Her accent was thick, Russian. You've created situation. Yelena Volkova, always a pleasure. Kyle's tone suggested it was anything but. Your men attacked my home. I defended it. Not much of a situation from my perspective. My men were acting on bad information. This we acknowledge. Yelena's eyes found Alara, assessed her like merchandise. The girl's father approached us, said she was being held against will. We believed we were conducting rescue. And the fact that I have a reputation for not trafficking people didn't suggest the information might be false. Desperate fathers lie convincingly. Yelena moved closer to Alara, and Kyle shifted to intercept. The woman smiled. Relax, Draven. I'm not here to continue hostilities. I'm here to negotiate return of my people. At what cost? Marcus Vance. Delivered to you. His debts transferred to Volkov organization, where we will collect them in ways that don't involve his daughter. She paused. And territory concessions, small ones, enough that I can tell my people this wasn't total loss. Kyle considered this. What territory? 3 blocks in Pilsen. Nothing you actively use, symbolic more than practical. And Marcus Vance comes to me alive. Alive, undamaged, with signed confession of what he sold and to whom. Yelena gestured to her men. In exchange, we take our people and this incident is forgotten. Forgotten except for the 3 of my men in the hospital, for which we will pay medical expenses and compensation. She named a figure that made Alara's head spin. Plus damages to your property. We were wrong to trust Vance's information. We pay for that mistake. Kale looked at Alara. Your call. They're offering me your father on a platter. Do I take it? Every eye in the room turned to her. Alara felt the weight of their attention, these dangerous people waiting for her decision. Her father had tried to have her kidnapped, had fabricated evidence, sold blueprints, put Kael's people in the hospital. But he was still her father, the man who'd pushed her on swings and made terrible pancakes on Sunday mornings before everything went wrong. I want to talk to him first, she said. Before you decide what to do with him, I want to hear him explain why he thought any of this was okay. Yelena nodded. This is reasonable. We will deliver him tomorrow, 10 a.m. Alive and able to speak, Kael added. Not beaten so badly he can't form sentences. You have my word. Yelena moved toward her men, then paused. The girl, she stays with you by choice? Yes, Alara answered before Kael could. I'm here because I want to be, because he's kept me safer than I've ever been in my life. Then your father is bigger fool than I thought. Yelena actually smiled. Good luck, girl. You'll need it in this world. When the Volkovs were gone, Alara felt her legs give out. Kael caught her before she hit concrete, lifted her like she weighed nothing, carried her to the elevator. I've got you, he murmured against her hair. I've got you. She didn't cry until they reached her room. Then it all came crashing down. The fear she'd suppressed during the assault, the betrayal of her father's actions, the weight of having to decide his fate. Kyle held her through it, silent and solid, letting her soak his shirt with tears and not saying a word. When she finally stopped, throat raw and eyes burning, she pulled back to find him watching her with an expression that made her chest tight. I'm sorry, she managed. For what? Having a human reaction to an inhuman situation? He brushed hair from her face. You're allowed to break sometimes, Alara. You don't have to be strong every second. I feel weak. You're not. You're processing trauma that would destroy most people. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You watched men fight and bleed because of your father's actions. You made a decision about his fate that required more strength than anything physical. That's not weakness. What would you have done if I'd said to kill him? Killed him. No hesitation. Because your safety matters more than his life. The certainty in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it felt like being seen. Like someone finally valued her more than the man who'd spent 24 years proving he didn't. I think I'm falling for you, she heard herself say. And I don't know if that's real or just gratitude or Stockholm syndrome or... He kissed her, cut off the spiral of words with his mouth on hers, soft and careful and nothing like she'd imagined, not aggressive or possessive, just tender in a way that made her heart stutter. When he pulled back, His eyes searched hers. I've been falling for you since the night you called your father's bluff and chose to stay. Since you started training instead of hiding. Since you walked into that meeting with Tanaka and didn't flinch. His forehead rested against hers. But I didn't say anything because I didn't want you to feel obligated. Didn't want you to think this protection came with expectations. What if I want expectations? Her hands fisted in his shirt. What if I want this to be real instead of just temporary safety? Then it's real. He kissed her again, deeper this time. But you need to understand what that means. I have enemies. Lots of them. Being with me makes you a permanent target. I'm already a target. Might as well be a target with someone who knows how to fight back. He laughed. Actual laughter, rare and wonderful. Fair point. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the aftermath of violence, both knowing this changed everything. Tomorrow her father would arrive. Tomorrow she'd have to face the man who'd tried to have her kidnapped and decide what mercy looked like. But tonight she had this. Had Kale's arms around her and the certainty that someone finally chose her first. Morning came too fast. Elara woke in her own bed. Kale had left sometime in the night, respecting boundaries even in the middle of emotional breakdown, and found a note on her nightstand. Your father arrives at 10. I'll be with you the whole time. Whatever you decide, I support it. Kay. She showered, dressed in clothes that felt like armor, and met Kyle in his office at 9:30. He looked like he'd slept even less than she had, shadows under his eyes and tension in his shoulders. Ready? He asked. No, but let's do it anyway. They went down to the basement together. Dmitri was already there, along with 4 other men who looked ready for violence if it became necessary. At exactly 10 a.m., the elevator opened and Yelena appeared with Marcus Vance between 2 of her people. Elara barely recognized her father. He'd lost weight, looked 10 years older, eyes hollow with fear and probably withdrawal. When he saw her, something that might have been relief crossed his face. Elara, baby, thank God. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Shut up. Her voice was cold, final. You don't get to talk unless I ask you a question. Marcus's mouth snapped closed. Yelena's people deposited him in a chair and stepped back. Elara moved closer, aware of Kyle's presence at her back like a shield. Did you sell the Volkov's information about this building? Yes, but I thought, yes or no questions only. She circled him slowly. Did you know they planned to kidnap me? Silence. Then, yes. Did you care what they might do to me once they had me? His eyes found hers, desperate. They said they'd keep you safe, said they'd get you away from Draven. Answer the question. Did you care what they might do to me? Longer silence. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I cared about staying alive. So no. She stopped in front of him. You didn't care. You sold me to save yourself. Again. What was I supposed to do? They were going to kill me. You were supposed to be my father. The words ripped out of her. You were supposed to protect me, not use me as currency every time you got desperate. I'm sorry. You're not sorry. You're scared. There's a difference. She looked at Kyle. I'm done. Do whatever you want with him. Elara, please. Marcus tried to stand. Dimitri's hand on his shoulder kept him seated. I gave you so many chances, she said quietly. So many opportunities to choose me over your addiction. And every single time you chose wrong. I'm not giving you any more. She turned to leave. Marcus called after her, voice breaking. I love you. You're my daughter. I was your daughter. Now I'm just the person you tried to sell. She didn't look back. And the only reason you're still breathing is because I asked them to let you live. Remember that. Kyle followed her to the elevator. When the doors closed, she let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. What will you do with him? Put him on a bus to another city. Spread the word that anyone who deals with him deals with me. He'll live, but he'll live poor and alone and knowing his daughter chose to save him even after he tried to destroy her. Kale's expression was grim. Sometimes mercy is crueler than death. Elara nodded. She'd made her choice, cut the last thread tying her to a man who'd never deserved her loyalty. Now she could build something new, something chosen instead of inherited, something real. The bus left at 3 p.m., carrying Marcus Vance toward a life Alara would never witness. She watched from Kyl's office window as the Greyhound pulled away from the terminal 6 blocks south, carrying her father and the last remnants of obligation she'd felt toward him. "You okay?" Kyl's voice came from behind her, soft. "I don't know." She turned to face him. "I thought I'd feel something. Relief, maybe, or sadness. But it's just empty." "Give it time. Grief doesn't follow schedules." He moved closer, hands in his pockets, like he wasn't sure if touching her was allowed after last night. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing." "Did I?" "He's my father. I just exiled him." "He exiled himself the moment he chose his debts over your safety." Kyl's expression was firm. "You gave him more mercy than he deserved. That says something about who you are." Alara sank into one of his office chairs, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was gone, leaving nothing but bone-deep weariness. "What happens now?" "Now you decide what comes next." Kyl sat across from her. "You're free, Alara. No father using you as leverage. No organizations hunting you for debts that aren't yours. You can leave if you want. I'll set you up somewhere safe, give you enough money to start over." "And if I don't want to leave?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Hope, maybe." "Then you stay. But you need to understand what that means long term. Last night wasn't a fluke. This life, my life, it's violent, dangerous. The attack on the building won't be the last time someone comes for me, for us." "I know." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm not naive anymore. I've seen what your world looks like. And I'm choosing it anyway." "Why?" The question was genuine, searching. "You could have anything. Go anywhere. Why choose this?" "Because for the first time in my life, I'm not invisible." The words came easier than she expected. "You see me. Not what I can do for you, not what you can use me for, just me. The good and the broken and everything in between." Kyl was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I see you because you're impossible not to see. You walked into my world terrified and turned that fear into strength. You didn't let your father's failures define you. You made choices even when every choice was terrible." He leaned forward. "That's not someone who deserves to be invisible." "Then teach me." Alara straightened. "You said you'd consider it if I finished training with Dimitri. I did. 3 months of getting my ass kicked every morning. So teach me how to do what you do. Let me be useful instead of just protected." "You understand what you're asking? This isn't playing at danger. Once you're part of my organization, you're in it. There's no calling time out when things get scary. I watched people bleed for me. I faced down the Volkovs. I exiled my own father." She held his stare. "I think I've proven I can handle scary." Kyl studied her face, and she could see him calculating, weighing risks against benefits. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but we start small. You don't jump into negotiations or operations. You learn the business side first. Money laundering, logistics, supply chains. The boring stuff that keeps the empire running." "How is money laundering boring?" "You'd be surprised." He almost smiled. "Most of my job is paperwork and phone calls. The violence is maybe 5%. The rest is making sure money moves where it needs to go without attracting attention." "Fine. I'll learn the boring stuff." She stood, moved to his side of the desk. "But eventually, I want to do more. I want to be someone you trust with the important things. Not just your girlfriend hiding in your building." "Is that what you are? My girlfriend?" His hands found her hips, pulled her closer. "Seems too small a word for what this is. What would you call it?" "Partnership. Alliance." He kissed her softly. "The person I trust with my empire and my life." "How's that sound?" "Terrifying and perfect." She kissed him back, deeper this time. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow. Today you rest. You've earned it." But Alara didn't want rest. She wanted to move forward, to prove herself, to become something more than Marcus Vance's discarded daughter. So she spent the afternoon in Kyl's office, watching him work, asking questions about the legitimate businesses that fronted his operations. "I own 17 companies," he explained, pulling up spreadsheets. "Everything from shipping to real estate to import-export. They're all functional, profitable businesses. They just also happen to move money I can't explain through legitimate channels. How much money are we talking? Last year, about 40 million that needed cleaning. He said it casually, like discussing grocery bills. This year's looking closer to 60. Business is good. Alara's head spun. She'd been surviving on minimum wage and tips while Kyle moved amounts of money she couldn't even conceptualize. Where does it all come from? Various sources. Some I can tell you about, some I can't. Not yet. He glanced at her. You want in on this life. You need to understand compartmentalization. I don't tell you everything. You don't tell me everything. That way, if something goes wrong, neither of us can destroy the other. That sounds paranoid. That's survival. His expression was serious. I trust you, Alara, but trust has limits in this world. The less you know about certain operations, the safer you are. It made sense in a twisted way. She nodded, filed it away under lessons learned. Over the next 3 months, Alara became a student of empire building. Kael taught her to read financial statements, to spot inconsistencies that suggested someone was skimming, to understand the flow of money through shell corporations and offshore accounts. She learned which banks asked questions and which ones didn't, which lawyers could be trusted and which ones would sell you out the moment the FBI came knocking. It was tedious work, mind-numbing sometimes, but she absorbed it all, understanding that this was the foundation. You couldn't run an empire if you didn't understand how it functioned. Dimitri continued her combat training, pushing her harder now that she'd proven she could handle it. She learned weapons handling, tactical movement, how to read a room for threats. Kael occasionally joined these sessions, and she discovered he moved like violence itself, efficient, precise, absolutely ruthless when necessary. You're getting better, he told her one morning after she'd managed to put him on the mat. He'd let her probably, but she'd take the win. Another 6 months, you'll be legitimately dangerous. Only 6 months? She offered him a hand up. I'm insulted. I'm being realistic. You started from zero. He pulled her against him, both of them sweaty and breathing hard. But you learn fast, faster than most. Good teacher. Better student. He kissed her, and she felt the now familiar heat that came with his touch. 3 months together, and it still felt new, urgent, like something that might disappear if they didn't hold on to it tightly enough. They'd fallen into a relationship that didn't have a name but worked anyway. Separate rooms that they rarely slept in separately. Dinners together when his schedule allowed. Quiet moments stolen between crises where they could just be two people instead of a crime boss and his whatever she was. Irina had warmed to her over time, teaching Alara to cook properly instead of the diner food survival skills she'd developed. You want to keep a man like Boss, Irina said, hands deep in bread dough. You feed him, but you also challenge him. He's had plenty of women who feed him or challenge him, never both. I'm not trying to keep him. We're just... Alara struggled for words. In love. Yes, very obvious. Irina waved a flowery hand. Whole building knows. Way he looks at you? Like you're only real thing in his world. And way you look at him? Like he hung the moon. She smiled. Is good. He needs someone who sees past the violence. Does it bother you, what he does? I've worked for Boss for 15 years. Started when he was just enforcer trying to survive. Watched him build this empire from nothing. Irina shaped the dough with practiced efficiency. He's not good man, but he's fair man. Protects his people. Doesn't hurt for pleasure. In this world, that's close to saint. Alara thought about that while the bread baked. Kyle wasn't good in any traditional sense. He'd killed people, would kill again, operated in a world where violence was currency. But he had rules, lines he wouldn't cross, and he'd chosen to protect her when he could have just let her father's debts consume her. That had to count for something. 6 months after her father left Chicago, Alara sat in on her first real negotiation. The Italians wanted to discuss territory boundaries in the South Side, and Kyle had decided she was ready to observe. Don't speak unless I signal you, he instructed in the car. Don't make promises. Don't react to threats. Just watch and learn. The meeting was in a restaurant the Italians owned, closed for the occasion. 4 men waited at a table that could seat 20, projecting power through empty chairs. Kyle brought only Dimitri and Alara, the minimal crew suggesting he wasn't scared. Draven! The man at the head of the table was 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of face that suggested he'd seen everything. "You bring your woman to business?" "I bring my associate," Kyle corrected smoothly. "Miss Vance is learning the trade." "Vance? I know this name." The man, Carmine, Elara remembered from her studies, narrowed his eyes. "Your father owed money to half of Chicago." "My father's debts died with his exile," Elara said, ignoring Kyle's warning look. "I'm here on my own merit." Carmine laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. "She has spine. Good. You'll need it in this world, girl." He turned to Kyle. "The territory question. You've been expanding into areas we consider ours." "I've been operating in neutral zones your people abandoned 5 years ago." Kyle pulled out a map, spread it across the table. "These 3 blocks. Empty storefronts, no protection rackets, no drug sales. You weren't using them, so I did." "Abandoned doesn't mean available. In this city, it does. Use it or lose it." Kyle leaned back. "But I'm willing to discuss reasonable boundaries if you're willing to acknowledge you don't own territory, you're not actively working." The negotiation went on for 2 hours. Elara watched Kyle work, saw how he gave ground on meaningless points to gain inches on what mattered. How he read Carmine's tells, knew when to push and when to back off. How he turned what could have been a violent confrontation into a deal both sides could live with. "You did well," Kyle told her afterward, back in the car. "Didn't speak, didn't react, stayed focused." "I spoke once," called out Carmine. "I know, that was good instinct. He was testing whether you'd let him define you by your father. You pushed back." He took her hand. "But next time, wait for my signal." Carmine was in a good mood. Others won't be. "There'll be more of these?" "Many more. This is how I spend half my life. Sitting in rooms with dangerous men, negotiating inches of territory and percentages of profit." He kissed her knuckles. "Welcome to the Empire." Elara discovered she was good at it. The negotiating, the reading of power dynamics, the careful balance of threat and diplomacy. Kale started bringing her to more meetings, using her as a secondary voice when he needed one. She learned to speak the language of this world. Careful words that meant more than they said. Threats wrapped in politeness. Deals structured to benefit both sides, just enough that nobody felt cheated. A year after Marcus Vance had tried to sell her to Kyle Draven, Elara Vance was a name people knew, not as collateral or victim, but as Kyle's right hand. The woman who managed his legitimate businesses, who sat in negotiations and held her ground, who'd proven herself dangerous enough to respect. "We should talk about the future," Kyle said one night, both of them on the rooftop garden watching the city lights. "Where this is going. Where do you want it to go?" "I want you as my partner, not just in business, but in everything." He turned to face her fully. "I want to know that 10 years from now you'll still be here, that this isn't temporary." "Is this a proposal?" "Not yet, but it's a promise that one is coming." His smile was soft, genuine. "I'm not good at this. The relationship part. I know how to run an empire, how to negotiate with killers, how to survive in a world that chews people up. But I don't know how to tell someone they've become the most important thing in my life without sounding like I'm making a business deal." Elara laughed, the sound free and light. "You're doing fine." "Am I?" He pulled a box from his pocket, small, velvet, the kind of box that made her heart skip. "Because I bought this 3 months ago, and I've been carrying it around like an idiot, trying to find the right moment." He opened it. A ring sat inside, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the light like ice. Not ostentatious, not trying to prove anything, just beautiful. "I know we're not traditional," Kyle continued, words coming faster now like he needed to get them all out. "I know marriage in my world is complicated, often more about alliances than love. But I don't care about any of that. I care about you, about building something with you that's ours, about having someone I trust completely in a world where trust can get you killed." He took the ring out, held it up. "So will you marry me? Knowing what I am, what I do, the dangers that come with it?" Elara felt tears threatening. Happy ones, for once. "Yes, obviously yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Kale didn't do anything halfway. They kissed on the rooftop while Chicago sprawled below them, a city of violence and beauty, danger and possibility. The same city that had tried to break them both and had instead taught them how to be unbreakable. The wedding was small, private, held in the building with only the people who mattered. No church, neither of them had use for religion, just Irina officiating with internet credentials, and a handful of Kael's most trusted people bearing witness. Alara wore a dress that Kael had commissioned, simple and elegant, nothing like the wedding she'd imagined as a girl. This was better. Real instead of fantasy. "You look beautiful," Kael told her when she appeared, and the rawness in his voice said he meant it. "You clean up okay yourself." He was in a suit that probably cost a fortune, hair actually styled for once, looking more like a Fortune 500 CEO than a crime boss. They said vows they'd written themselves, promises to protect each other, to be honest even when truth was hard, to build something together that would outlast them both. No mention of traditional roles or obedience or any of the things that felt wrong for what they were building. "I take you as my partner," Kael said, holding her hands, "in empire and in life. Through violence and peace, profit and loss, danger and safety. What's mine is yours. What I am is yours. Everything until I stop breathing." "I take you as my equal," Alara responded. "In all things. I promise to stand beside you, not behind you, to be strong enough to carry my own weight and wise enough to ask for help when I can't, to love you for what you are, not what I wish you could be." Irina pronounced them married, and they kissed to applause from the small gathered crowd. It felt real in a way nothing else in Alara's life ever had. Not a transaction, not a survival mechanism, but a choice made freely by two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and decided to build something better. The reception was chaos in the best way. Someone had hired a DJ who played everything from classical to hip-hop. Dmitri got drunk and told embarrassing stories about Kael's early days as an enforcer. Irina cried happy tears and blamed it on the wine. Alara danced with her husband. The word felt strange and wonderful, and felt lighter than she had in years, maybe ever. "What are you thinking?" Kael asked, holding her close during a slow song. "That I'm happy. Actually, genuinely happy." She looked up at him. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this way." "Neither did I." He kissed her forehead. "I thought happiness was for other people, people who didn't live the way I live. Turns out you were wrong. Turns out you were right." He smiled. "About a lot of things." 2 years into their marriage, Alara sat in Kael's office, their office now, reviewing quarterly reports when Irina knocked. "Someone here to see you both," she said, expression strange. "Says it's important." The woman who entered was tall, elegant, with Alara's eyes and cheekbones. It took a moment to recognize her. 14 years changes a face. "Mom?" Catherine Vance looked older, tired, but put together in a way Alara remembered from childhood. "Hello, Alara. I know I have no right to be here, but I heard you got married, and She stopped, collected herself. "I wanted to see you. To apologize. To explain, if you'll let me." Kael's hand found Alara's under the desk, squeezed. Support, not control. Her choice. "You left when I was 12, Alara said, voice steady. Disappeared without a word. Let me think it was my fault somehow." "It was never your fault. It was your father." Catherine's voice broke. "I left because staying was killing me. His drinking, his gambling, his rages. I chose to save myself. But I should have taken you with me. Should have fought for you. I didn't, and I've regretted it every day since." "Why now? Why after 14 years?" "Because I'm dying." Catherine said it simply, factually. "Cancer. 6 months, maybe a year, and I needed to see you before I go. Needed to tell you I'm sorry for leaving you with him, for not being strong enough to take you away from that life." Alara felt Kael's thumb stroke across her knuckles, grounding her. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. Just forgiveness, maybe? Or at least understanding." Catherine's eyes were wet. "You were always stronger than me, even as a child. I see you now, married, running businesses, looking so sure of yourself. You survived what I couldn't. I'm proud of you." The words hit harder than expected. Her mother, proud. After years of feeling abandoned and worthless, to hear that someone from her old life saw value in what she'd become. I can't forgive you yet, Alara said slowly. You made a choice that hurt me for years, but I understand it better now. Sometimes saving yourself means leaving people behind. That's more than I deserve, Catherine stood. I won't take more of your time. I just needed you to know I'm sorry, and that I love you. Always have. She turned to leave. Alara heard herself call out, Wait! Catherine paused. 6 months, you said. Where are you staying? A hospice facility on the north side, Medicaid coverage, nothing fancy. Alara looked at Kyle. He nodded, understanding without words. We have a guest room here. Medical care we can arrange. If you'd like to spend your last month somewhere comfortable, the offer's there. Catherine's face crumpled. I don't deserve your kindness. Probably not, but I'm offering it anyway. Alara stood. You don't get to run from consequences anymore. You want forgiveness? Earn it. Stay. Let me get to know the mother I lost. And maybe by the end, we'll both find some peace. It was hard. Catherine was difficult, her illness making her irritable and demanding. But slowly, over weeks and then months, they found a rhythm. Late-night conversations where Catherine talked about her early marriage, before Marcus's addictions consumed him. Stories about Alara as a toddler, fearless and curious. Apologies that came in pieces, each one taking visible effort. Kyle gave them space but was there when Alara needed him. A steady presence that didn't judge, didn't pressure, just supported whatever she decided. You didn't have to do this, Catherine said one night, weak from chemo but determined to speak. After what I did to you. I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for me. Alara adjusted her mother's pillows. I'm breaking cycles. You abandoned me, Dad sold me, and I'm choosing to be different, to offer grace even when it's not deserved. Your husband? He's good to you? He's everything I needed and nothing I expected. Alara smiled. He saw me when I was invisible, made me strong when I felt weak, gave me choices when everyone else just made demands. I'm glad. Catherine's hand found hers, grip weak but genuine. I'm glad you found someone who values you the way you deserve. Catherine Vance died 4 months later, peacefully, with Alara holding her hand. Her last words were an apology and a thank you, and Alara chose to accept both. The funeral was small. Just Alara, Kyle, and a few of Catherine's friends from before the marriage had turned toxic. Alara cried, but they were complicated tears. Grief mixed with relief mixed with the closure she'd needed for 14 years. You okay? Kale asked afterward, both of them on the rooftop garden that had become their refuge. I will be. She leaned into him. I got to say goodbye. That's more than I thought I'd ever have. Your mother was right about one thing. He kissed the top of her head. You are stronger than most people. You took someone who abandoned you and gave them grace. That takes a kind of strength most people never develop. I learned it from you. You could have killed my father, could have refused to let my mother stay, but you gave them both mercy because I asked. She looked up at him. That's strength too, knowing when not to use the power you have. 5 years after Marcus Vance had brought his daughter to a penthouse to settle a debt, Alara Draven stood in the same space, redecorated now, warmer, more lived in, and barely recognized the terrified girl she'd been. She'd built a life on her own terms, ran legitimate businesses that funneled money for illegitimate ones, and did both well enough that Kyle trusted her with increasingly important operations. She negotiated with organizations that would have terrified her years ago, sat in rooms with dangerous men and held her ground. But more than that, she'd built a partnership with someone who saw her as an equal, who valued her mind as much as her company, who pushed her to be better while accepting who she was. I have something to tell you, she said one morning over breakfast, stomach fluttering with nerves. Kale looked up from his tablet. Good something or bad something? Good. I think. I hope. She took a breath. I'm pregnant. He went very still. The tablet clattered to the counter. You're about 8 weeks. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. She watched his face, trying to read his reaction. I know we never really discussed kids. I know your life is dangerous and this complicates things. But He kissed her, cut off the spiral of words with his mouth on hers, fierce and gentle and absolutely certain. Good something. he said when they broke apart. Definitely good something. You're not scared? Terrified. He laughed, the sound shaky. I'm bringing a child into a world where people try to kill me for profit. But I'm also... He paused, searching for words. Happy. Excited. Ready to give our kid everything we didn't have growing up. Safety, stability, parents who choose them first. Exactly. His hand found her still flat stomach. We'll make it work. Increase security, create protocols, do whatever necessary to keep you both safe. The pregnancy was complicated by their circumstances. Kael hired a private doctor who didn't ask questions, installed medical equipment in the building that could handle emergencies, created evacuation plans for scenarios Alara tried not to think about. But he was also tender in ways she'd never seen, protective without being controlling, worried without being overbearing. He moved meetings to accommodate her morning sickness, installed a nursery next to their bedroom, read parenting books with the same focus he applied to business negotiations. You're going to be a good father, Alara told him one night, watching him assemble a crib with intense concentration. You don't know that. I do. Because you're already thinking about what our child needs, already putting them first. She moved to help him, handed him the right screw. That's what good parents do. And we're going to be good parents because we know exactly what bad ones look like. Their daughter was born on a Tuesday in March, 7 pounds and furious about being evicted from her warm home. Kael held her with the kind of careful reverence usually reserved for explosives, tears streaming down his face. She's perfect, he whispered. She's beautiful. Alara was exhausted, wrecked, and happier than she'd ever been. What should we name her? They'd discussed names for months, never settling on anything that felt right. But looking at their daughter's face, red and scrunched, and absolutely herself, Alara knew. Hope, she said. Let's call her Hope. Kael looked at her, understanding flooding his expression. Hope for a better future. Hope that they could build something good from their broken pasts. Hope that this tiny person would have the childhood neither of them had. Hope Draven, he agreed. It's perfect. Parenthood changed everything and nothing. They were still who they were. Kael still ran his empire. Alara still managed operations that straddled legal and illegal. But now they did it with a daughter sleeping in the next room, with Arena providing childcare between cooking and managing household staff, with security protocols that made the building even more fortress-like. Alara discovered she could negotiate shipping contracts while nursing, could review financial statements during nap time, could be both mother and business partner without sacrificing either role. You're exhausted, Kael said one night, finding her working at 3 a.m. while Hope slept. So are you. He'd been on a conference call with Tokyo until midnight. Fair point. He sat beside her, took her hand. We're doing okay, right? With all of this? We're doing better than okay. We're building something real. She gestured around them, at the home they'd created, the empire they ran, the daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall. My father tried to sell me to save himself. Your father did the same to you, and we're breaking that cycle. We're choosing hope every single day. Every single day, Kael agreed. He kissed her, soft and sure. I love you. You know that, right? I don't say it enough, but I know. She kissed him back. I love you too, for seeing me when I was invisible, for making me strong, for being my partner in everything. Hope grew into a bright, fearless child who had her mother's stubbornness and her father's strategic mind. By age 3, she'd figured out how to manipulate Dimitri into extra cookies by smiling at him just right. By 5, she was learning to read people's tells in a way that would serve her well, whether she chose this life or left it behind. She has options, Alara told Kael one night, watching their daughter sleep. When she's older, she can choose to be part of this or walk away. We give her both possibilities. Agreed. We teach her how the world works, the good and bad parts. Then we let her decide what kind of person she wants to be. 10 years after a desperate father had brought his daughter to pay his debts, Alara stood on the rooftop garden with her family. Kael was teaching Hope about the city spread below them, pointing out neighborhoods and explaining their histories. Their daughter asked questions with the kind of fearless curiosity that made Alara's heart ache. This was what she'd fought for, what she'd survived for, Not just safety or wealth or power, but this moment, her husband patient and gentle with their daughter, their life built on choices instead of circumstances, their future open and possible. Mom? Hope tugged on her hand. Dad says you used to be scared of heights. I was, a long time ago. What changed? Alara looked at Kyle, found him smiling at her with the same expression he'd had on their wedding day. Love and respect and partnership all tangled together. I learned that sometimes the scariest things lead to the best views, she said, pulling Hope into a hug. And that having people who love you makes it easier to be brave. Hope nodded seriously, already processing this wisdom in whatever way her brilliant mind worked. Then she was off again, asking Kyle about the lake and the buildings and everything her curious mind could touch. Alara watched them together and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. The knowledge that she'd taken the worst night of her life and transformed it into something beautiful. Her father had tried to destroy her by selling her as payment. Instead, he'd given her to someone who saw her value and helped her become the person she was always meant to be, strong, capable, loved, free. Not despite the darkness she'd survived, but because of it. She'd learned to fight, to negotiate, to protect what mattered. She'd built an empire with her husband and a family with her heart. She'd broken cycles and created new possibilities. And standing on that rooftop with her small, fierce family, Alara Draven knew she'd finally become exactly who she was supposed to be. Not a victim, not collateral, not invisible. A woman who'd taken captivity and turned it into freedom. Who'd transformed punishment into the greatest love she'd ever known. Who'd proven that sometimes the worst things that happen to you become the foundation for the best life you could build. The night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights. Hope pointed up at them, already asking questions about constellations and space. Kyle answered with the same patience he showed in boardrooms and negotiations, adapting his knowledge to a 5-year-old's understanding. Thank you, Alara said quietly, words meant only for him. He looked at her, understanding immediately. For what? For seeing me. For choosing me. For giving me this. She gestured at everything, their daughter, their home, their impossible life. You gave it to yourself. I just provided the space for you to become who you already were. He kissed her forehead. You saved yourself, Alara. I just made sure you had time to do it. Maybe they were both right. Maybe it took both things. Someone seeing your potential and you choosing to reach for it. Maybe survival required both strength and support, both fighting and accepting help when it was offered. Hope ran back to them, full of new questions and observations. They answered together, partners in this like everything else. And as Chicago glittered below them, full of danger and beauty and endless possibility, Alara felt nothing but gratitude for the path that had led her here, for the man who'd become her partner, for the daughter they were raising to be fearless and kind, for the life they'd built from the ruins of their pasts. She'd been sold to pay a debt and had gained everything worth having. That was the real story. Not about being saved, but about saving herself. About taking the worst hand life could deal and playing it into something magnificent. And as her family stood together